Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, Episode 8. Today we start with Chapter 25. Princess did not seem to be in any hurry to take care of her business, and Amy Fritz was becoming annoyed. She had put in a long day at the office and just wanted her poodle to do her due, so she could go back inside and tackle the list of things she had to accomplish before the day was over. Her evening still involved finding something to eat for dinner, emptying the dryer, working out with Billy Blanks, taking a hot bath, and spending at least an hour organizing her notes for the next story. But she would savor every minute of it. Amy did not have anyone to share in her happiness tonight other than Princess, her spoiled 2-year-old best friend. But conversely, she did not have to worry at all about the other things that come along with the relationship, like feeling guilty or pressured, and the facts brought her comfort. She could concentrate on her for the rest of the evening. Amy had not had a steady relationship in the past few years, and for that, she was perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, it was her decision, a decision that had ticked off more than one would-be suitor. And despite the turmoil she had suffered from past relationships, her friends and coworkers could not understand why she chose to be alone. Still, she was confident that once she reached a certain level in her career, she would have the time and the desire to meet Mr. Right. She had proven to be very good at finding Mr. Wrong, and had paid for it with her heart. She had good reason to be happy tonight, though. The front page of tomorrow morning's early edition would include a story written solely by Amy Fritz. It did not matter to her that it would be located below the fold. What did matter was that she was meeting one of her lifelong goals, and she was absolutely thrilled. Her lucky streak had started just over a week ago with the news that a second male body had been found naked and beaten. Her instincts had told her to dig deeper. Amy had not been content to listen only to what the police wanted her to hear. Using her connections and journalistic instinct, she had gathered enough information to convince her editor to put her on the front page. The story would reveal the connection between child predators, including the police captain's son-in-law, and a man who called himself the defender of children. It would even include clips of a letter written by the murderer and briefly detail each murdered man's family and his life. Although it was not her goal, not by any means, Annette Coffer, her editor, detected a tone of sympathy for the man committing the crimes. As a result, Amy instantly wanted to change the article's spin, but Annette enticed her to leave it alone with the expectation that if the readers could connect with this man and his cause, they would be hooked and eager to learn more about him with each article. With each article? Amy was not entirely convinced, but her story was going to be on the front page, and she had no problem with that. The first follow-up article would include a psychiatric description of the murderer's likely emotions and thought processes, and provide first-hand account of 3 adults who had been victims of child predators. She did not have a lead for her third story, but she knew, if her luck held out, it would present itself before her next deadline. Chapter 27. Pontiac drove remarkably well. Myles had wanted a car he'd be happy with, but he did not want to spend too much time making his decision. He had a long trip back, and if possible, he wanted to get some rest before going to work tomorrow. After 2 dealerships and only 1 test drive, he decided on the G6 Coupe. It was black with leather interior and had a sunroof, CD player, power everything, even a navigation system. With his trade-in, the car was well within his price range, but he was not worried about making the payments. As far as he knew, he wouldn't be around long enough even to make the first one. The car seemed to glide down the interstate as he headed back to his reality. Myles had been wrestling with the idea of giving up the cause since pulling the trigger on Brandon. That shot had changed him, and not for the better. The murky criminal world he had crossed into was not where he wanted to be. He prayed for a sign that would point him the right way. He had not heard anything new regarding the case, no mention of the latest murders, nothing. For some reason, that made him more anxious than he would have expected. Maybe the notion of no news is good news doesn't apply in this situation, he thought. Despite his nervousness, Myles realized after a few hours of travel that he was hungry and decided to pull over to get something to eat. As he walked into Earl's Burger Shack, he could smell the beef sizzling on the grill. He firmly believed that the best burgers came from either truck stops or small family-owned establishments like this one. The sign above the counter even claimed they had the county's best burger. Myles walked straight to the back to the restroom to wash up and then chose a table next to the window so he could keep an eye on his latest purchase. She was mighty pretty, he thought, even in the shadows of the parking lot. He knew he shouldn't order the big burger and the fries and the shake, but he felt he deserved to spoil himself a little bit at this point. While he waited for his food, he glanced over the sports section of the local paper, which someone had left at his table. Two men walked by and took their seats in the booth behind him. Myles was never very good at eating out alone. It made him feel awkward. He tried to focus his attention on the scores from last night's games, but he found himself listening to the conversation taking place behind him. Only a short time after sitting down, one of the two men started talking about how he spent the morning scoping out kids at the local park. His companion then started asking about his exploits before chiming in with his own account of his excursion to the junior high today, where he had been checking out the stock. Myles could not believe his ears. Stopping in for the county's best burger had led him to his sign. He was surprisingly calm while he finished his meal and was glad he had ordered what he did. For one, the burger was delicious. Secondly, the two men were in no hurry to leave. Their topic of conversation had changed several times, but their undertone of perversion did not. It was always the same with these men, Myles thought. He wondered if he could take out two predators at once. Since he did not want to use the gun, unless absolutely necessary, he knew he would need a plan. The brake line had worked, to some degree, once already. There were only 3 cars in the parking lot. He remembered when he had parked outside. His was one of 2 on the premises. So, by process of elimination, the car next to his must belong to one of the perverts behind him, while the third must be for the server or the cook in the back. Could severing the brake line work twice for him, he thought? Later, he had realized he gave in to the notion without any consideration. As he paid his bill, Myles glanced back to make sure the men were not preparing to leave. He decided to make use of the restroom before heading out, since he would not want to stop once he was on the road. Myles felt good. His belly was full, and he had been given another opportunity to defend the children. Outside, the brisk air felt good on his face, and he felt alive with the realization of his purpose. The sign had been unmistakable, and he could not deny his destiny. Within 5 minutes, he had surveyed the area around the cars to make sure he was alone, and then he slipped under the other car where he cut the brake line with one swift swoop of his knife. He was proud of himself, in a way, yet concerned with how easily he had accomplished this task. He felt like he had become another man and wondered if others saw the difference in him. Then he realized there were no others. There had been no time for others in his life, for a while now. Myles moved his car to the far end of the lot and waited, never giving thought to leaving. He wanted to watch it play out until the end. In the meanwhile, a carload of teenagers pulled in the parking lot, laughing and joking as they got out of the car. He was captivated by the teens and unhappy they appeared to be until the 2 men came into his peripheral vision. They approached the teens, 3 girls and 2 boys, and began talking to them. But Myles could not hear what they were saying from where he sat. Body language, however, indicated that the men were making inappropriate comments to the girls and that the boys were trying to protect them. The taller of the 2 men Myles had seen in the restaurant grabbed for one of the girls. One of the boys stepped in front of her and looked ready to fight, although it was clear that either of the 2 boys would lose a physical altercation. Without thinking, Myles instinctively hit his lights, making them bright, and sped towards the group as they watched with fear-stricken faces as the car approached them. The teens made a run for the front door of the diner, and Myles could tell the men were considering following them, but decided against it. Then he stopped and waited. He was ready to chase or be chased. If they came after him, he could watch in the rearview mirror as they realized their brakes were gone. He inched his car forward until he could sneak a peek around the building. He saw the taillights of the mid-'80s Toyota heading in the direction of the highway. They decided not to bother with the guy in the car. Myles looked off in the same direction and decided to follow. A quick glance in the rearview mirror assured him that the teens were seated inside the diner, unharmed, laughing and happy again. This is for them, and many like him, he thought. Chapter 28. Amy was awoken by the ringing phone. She groped sleepily at the items on her desktop table: a clock radio, a book she had been struggling to make her way through, the watch her parents had given her, and finally the cordless phone that stopped ringing as soon as she picked it up. No sooner had she rolled over for a few more minutes of sleep when the phone began to ring again. Someone was looking for me way too early in the morning, she thought. Before she could even grumble hello, Debbie began talking so fast that Amy could not keep up with what she was hearing. After begging her friend and coworker to slow down, she was finally able to get the gist of the call. Amy clicked on the television as instructed by Debbie, then fumbled with the remote control to turn down the volume low enough so that she could hear both the news on CNN and the voice at the other end of the line. Both women were silent as the anchor recapped the story of the defender of children, quoting from the article Amy had written. Amy thanked her friend, rolled over, and took a deep breath, determined not to let one article go to her head. She had not been raised that way. But if the next one makes the front page, that might be a different story. Over her morning bowl of Raisin Bran, she had read the article as if it was for the first time. When she was done, she sat and stared at her spoon and the reflection within. She was published on the front page of a real paper, just like she had set out to do. She knew her article would not win a literary award of any kind, but she felt sure her college professors, at least, would be pleased. She was living and working in a man's world and was thriving at this point. With surgical precision, she carefully cut out her article from the paper. The night before, she had addressed an envelope to her parents and placed a stamp on it. She had no doubt they would be proud. Amy was fully aware that she would have to follow up this article with something new and interesting related to the killings. Today, she would beat the bushes and work the phones. She felt the pressure, and she loved it. Chapter 29. Myles panicked. No longer able to see the taillights of the weathered Toyota Celica on the road ahead, he thought momentarily that he had lost them. But once he reached the interstate on-ramp, he spotted the predators again. Myles realized that they could have very well headed north, opposite his direction, but it seemed that fate had sent them south. They did not seem to be in any hurry, so Myles would be able to catch up with them without speeding. Things must be going my way, he thought. As he traveled down the congested interstate at 72 miles an hour, surrounded by families going on vacation, parents toting their kids to and from ball practice, and business people on their phones making the deals that would enable them to send their kids to summer camp, Myles broke into a sweat as the old familiar aches returned to his head and stomach. What was I thinking? He was confronted by the realization that he had no idea how his plan would play out and envisioned the carnage he could potentially be responsible for. This was not what I was called to do. Myles began to believe that he had misread the sign he received at the diner, or that the mission had changed. He tried to focus on the road ahead as his vision began to blur from the pain in his head. Gripping the steering wheel with all his might, he willed the pain to pass and tried to control his breathing in order to prevent hyperventilation. He knew that the predators should start experiencing trouble any time now and wondered why he had even considered cutting the brake line. He prayed that this scenario would not end badly, but the driver of the Celica was trailing the Suburban in front of him too closely, and the roadway was packed with automobiles and tractor trailers. Sweat burned his eyes, and he wiped them with the sleeve of his shirt, which had already become saturated with his perspiration. Myles thought about getting off the highway at the next exit to let his body get back to normal, and to avoid witnessing the disaster he had set in motion. Nevertheless, he continued to follow, alternatively wiping his sweaty hands with his jeans so that he could maintain his deep grip on the steering wheel. There were moments when he felt sure the predators would not make the next curve and simply plow into the guardrail without result. He continued to pray for divine intervention. The flow of traffic topped an incline, and each automobile picked up speed on the descent. Judging by all the brake lights flashing on and off, Myles guessed that the bottom of the hill was a prime location for state troopers to catch speeders. He let other cars pass him by without losing sight of the Toyota that had made its way near the front of the pack. If its brakes gave out now, and the ensuing pileup would surely go down in I-81 history. What happened next was so unexpected, Myles began to sob instantly. He watched as the navy blue Celica began to swerve within his lane. By now, it would be apparent to the driver and his passenger that something was wrong. Myles thought they were going to run into the back of an 18-wheeler directly in front of them. He envisioned them slamming hard into the rear of the semi, catching fire and rolling to a stop as the inferno avoided all of the cars on the road. Instead, the car missed the truck and skidded off the road where a good Samaritan was helping an elderly couple change a flat tire on their station wagon. The Celica hit the station wagon with such force that Myles tried to assure himself that these three people felt no pain as they died. In seconds, the two cars became one fiery mass. Traffic began to halt as drivers and passengers gawked at the scene in horror. Myles was forced to follow suit. As he shifted in his seat, he saw the woman and two small children sitting in the SUV parked on the right-hand side of the interstate, and was sickened by the realization that they most likely were the family of the Good Samaritan. The woman was wailing while doing her best to calm the children who were restrained in their car seats. Myles was close enough to see their eyes and discern that they were in shock from what they had seen happen to their daddy. The scene itself, inside that car, would be etched in Myles' mind forever, and he had been consumed by their despair and hopelessness and by his realization that he had taken their father and husband away in an instant. Without thought of consequence, he put the G6 in gear and weaved through the parked cars until he was ahead of the pack and speeding away from the nightmare he had created. Tears streamed down Myles' face. Abort mission. And that's the end of episode 8. I know it was a little shorter episode. It just felt like that's where we should stop with Myles for today. We'll pick up chapter 30 next time on My Words, Our Journey. Thank you and have a great day.